Hello everyone, welcome into the Ultimate Scouting YouTube channel. My name is Connor. I'm really excited to get this channel underway. I'm going to talk so many different things about football here. As the NFL season gets started, we're going to go ahead, we're going to do power rankings, record predictions. This is also primarily an NFL draft channel, so we're going to be talking a lot about college football players, where we think that they might end up in this NFL draft. So it's just going to be a lot of different things. I'm really excited to get going. Today, we're going to be doing a division preview. We're going to be talking about the AFC South. This division is really interesting because there's kind of two teams that are really looking to be really competitive right now early on, and then there's two teams that have young quarterbacks and they're trying to build their roster in a new coach's image. And so that's going to be really interesting to discuss here. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to dive in. Before we do that, I would ask if you like this video and you like, talking about football, then I ask you to please subscribe, comment, like the video down below. This is something that I'm really hoping to get going and talk a lot of football this season. So let's go ahead. We're going to dive into the AFC South here. And we'll go ahead, we'll start with who finished dead last in the division last year. Team with the first overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Second straight year that they've had the first overall pick. They took Trayvon Walker this year. They took Trevor Lawrence last year. The biggest thing with this team is you got rid of Urban Meyer, which is great. You bring in a Super Bowl winning head coach, Doug Peterson, which I don't know that he was the main factor behind that Super Bowl win, but just being able to know how to win is crucially important for a young roster like the Jaguars have. And so I think that that was a decent hire. He wasn't my favorite. I think a lot of his schemes kind of grew a little bit stale in Philadelphia, which is the reason he got fired ultimately. But I do think that he's not Urban, so it's already an improvement no matter what. And he does bring a culture of winning, which I think is really important for an organization that just simply hasn't won a whole lot in existence. So you bring in Doug Peterson, and you're really trying to get Trevor Lawrence to develop this season. They threw a lot of money at a lot of pieces to try to make that happen for him. Of course, there's the notorious Christian Kirk contract, which, yeah, they massively overpaid for Christian Kirk, but they can get out of it after a couple of years, and you're trying to just give Lawrence things he needs to be successful and really spur along that development so he continues to ascend as a franchise quarterback that they drafted him to be. Go ahead, you bring in Brandon Scherff from Washington, one of the best guards in the NFL. That's definitely a good sign. You bring back Cam Robinson as well to be left tackle. So you're kind of working to solidify that offensive line a little bit. Bring in Zay Jones from the Raiders. Again, overpaid for him, but you continue to build weapons for Lawrence, which is definitely a good thing. On defense, you bring in Folise Oludokun from the Atlanta Falcons. I think, again, overpaid for him. You're noticing a theme here, but it's a good player. You bring in Foley Fatukasi from the Jets, one-tech nose tackle type that they desperately needed. In the draft, you bring in Trayvon Walker, you bring in Devin Lloyd, you bring in Chad Muma. They let Myles Jack go, so they're really overhauling that front seven. And I think that this team is really just building for the future. Ultimately, the whole season comes down to, is Lawrence showing significant improvement? And I think they've given him at least a chance of doing that. And I believe in Lawrence. He was one of the highest graded quarterbacks coming out of school for me I've ever seen. He's fantastic. He's got all the tools to make a generational type quarterback. And I think that the Jaguars, though they may have overpaid for some of the pieces, they have surrounded him with enough talent that he can kind of continue to ascend to that ceiling that he has. This team is still lacking talent in some key areas, but you do have a good running back room. You have a more solidified offense. Your front seven is more talented. You've got that generational quarterback. You've got a couple of weapons that you added as well. You added Evan Ingram from the Giants as well. Hopefully he can learn how to catch in Jacksonville. But you've added some pieces now, and you're going to hope that Lawrence is able to take that team to the next level a little bit. So I don't project this team to be a bottom feeder. I think, we're going to do win floors and win ceilings before we kind of give an overall record prediction in another video. But here, I think that the floor is really probably about 3 wins. I don't think that they're going to be the worst team in the league. Uh, I could see them going as high as probably about 7 wins. They still lack talent in key areas, and that's just going to hold them back from being crazy successful. But I do think that this team could be on the little bit higher end of that. I think they could win 5, 6, 7 games, which would be a really big step in the right direction for them. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to move on to the Houston Texans. The Texans are also a team that many projected to be dead last in the NFL last year because they simply just don't have a lot of roster talent, and that remains the case still. They are probably the least talented roster in the NFL right now, in my eyes. So you fire David Culley, which I think Culley did a pretty decent job with what he was given. I wouldn't have fired him. I think that he did what he could with a really, really bad roster, and they played hard for him all the way through the year. And regardless, they decide to move on. They hire Lovie Smith, who was the defensive coordinator there last year. Lovie Smith is, an established NFL coach. He had a nice tenure with the Bears back a couple years ago, back a while ago. But you bring in Lovie Smith, you get Pep Hamilton to be offensive coordinator. It's a decent staff to build around. And then Davis Mills showed some really nice flashes last year. If you go back and you watch the game, nobody talked about Davis Mills during the season. He was a third-round quarterback, wasn't really one of the big 5 that got drafted in the first round as a rookie, and he outplayed probably most of them. And you take out the Buffalo game, which was just, against the best defense, against a really good team. You take that out, he has some really solid stats. He threw 10 touchdowns, he had 7 interceptions, but 4 of those came against Buffalo. So really, if you take that one game out, he played really well. Now, do I think that Davis Mills is going to be, a top 10 quarterback? No, and I don't think he's probably ever going to get there. I don't think he just has the ability to elevate the players around him in that same way that some of those top quarterbacks do. But do I think he can be, a Kirk Cousins, a Ryan Tannehill, Andy Dalton back when there was the Dalton line? I think he absolutely can be, the 15th, 16th best quarterback if he was given talent around him. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't have that in Houston, but I think he certainly showed enough. He has great poise, good accuracy on all levels of the field. His pocket presence is honestly pretty good as well. So, you cut down some of those interceptions, you continue to improve your decision making. I think he's got a decent future ahead of him, whether that's in Houston or not. This offseason, they did add some key pieces. You brought in Derek Stingley, who was the 3rd overall pick, the corner out of LSU. He's much needed. He brings, a high-end athletic corner that they desperately needed. You go ahead, you bring in Kenyon Green to solidify that left guard spot, another spot that they desperately needed. You get John Mechie, who unfortunately will not be able to play this year due to a leukemia diagnosis. Obviously hope that everything is going well for him, but he won't be out there on the field this year. You get Dameon Pierce, who's going to be a probably big-time player for them out of Florida. He's a running back, and he's going to play a lot this year. Look for him to have a big role. But he's someone that I think will certainly play a lot this year, and they're going to have a lot of young contributors like him on this team. At receiver, you've got Brandon Cooks, who is a really good player. You've got Nico Collins as well, who's maybe ascending. At offensive line, you've got Laramie Tunsil on the left side. Him and Green should be a good duo. The center to the right tackle is probably going to be a bit of a liability. Defense is really not a lot of guys that you're excited about. I think that defense is going to be a place that they really struggle this year, and they don't have a lot of talent on this team. And I like that the culture that they're building here, it's kind of a thing of, if you want to be here, be here. We're not going to hold you here. If you don't want to be, we get it. We're in a rebuilding phase. But this is a team that's, I think, being built the right way. They just lack talent at this point. So my projection for them is probably somewhere from 2 to 5 wins. I just don't see them being a team that's really super successful this year. You do have Brandon Cooks, you have Davis Mills, Dameon Pierce, Laramie Tunsil. You've got some good players that are going to keep you in games. Jonathan Grenard on the defensive side is a really good player. You've got Stingley, of course, as well. So you've got pieces to build around. It's just they're not quite there yet. With that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move to the team that finished second in the division last season. That is the Indianapolis Colts. As Colts fans, I'm sure know, they were in a position to make the playoffs last year, and then they really just fell apart at the end of the season. And probably the biggest piece of that was quarterback play. Carson Wentz was atrocious down the stretch. And so they said, all right, we're done with you. 1 year of Carson Wentz, we're done. We're shipping you off to Washington. We're going to bring in Matt Ryan. And while at this point in his career, Matt Ryan isn't a top-end quarterback, he's not going to play back to his MVP levels. I do think that he's good enough that he at least brings stability to the position. You take that volatility that you got with Carson Wentz that really kind of destroyed your season, and you eliminate that as much as you can. Matt Ryan is probably one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the NFL. You know what you're going to get with him. It's good. It's not, top-end quarterback play, but it's not Carson Wentz either, who has flashes of brilliance and flashes of, oh my God, what are you doing? So for a team that's built like the Colts, who want to run the ball behind a really good offensive line with Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith, that's a good run-blocking offensive line. And then you've probably got the best running back in football right now with Jonathan Taylor. They want to run the ball. You don't want to be giving away, easy interceptions from your quarterback. And Matt Ryan kind of reduces a lot of that volatility, and he makes it a lot easier to kind of build an offense in that image. On the defensive side of the ball, the front seven is really good. You add Yannick Ngakoue, who's a great speed rusher, to DeForest Buckner, who is one of the best interior pass rushers in the NFL. You've got former first-round pick Kwity Paye on the other side there, who's a really good player as well. He's ascending. And then you've got Shaquille, formerly Darius Leonard, who is just crazy at forcing fumbles. It is truly a skill, and he's a really good player. And he's playing up to that really expensive contract that he signed. He's a great player. And so you've got good depth at linebacker as well. That's a really good front seven that you can build around. The secondary is not amazing. You added Stephon Gilmore. You added Nick Cross to replace Julian Blackmon, who retired. You've got some decent players on that side of the ball in the back end, but this team is all about stability. You've got a good front seven. You've got good coaching. You've got a reliable quarterback now. You've got a really good offensive approach of run the ball behind our great offensive line, and we're going to pound it down your throats. And I think that they're constructed in a really good way this season to be competitive, because you've got that stability now at quarterback. You've got the good coaching to go with it. You added Alec Pierce in the draft to go with Michael Pittman. You got some decent weapons for Matt Ryan as well. I think that this is going to be a really good team this year. I fully expect them to be competing for the AFC South title, and I actually think that they're favorites to win it. We'll talk about Tennessee in a minute here, but I definitely project them to be the best team in this division this year. I see their win total probably from about 9 wins to 12 wins. I think 12 is probably a little bit high, but they don't have necessarily a tough schedule. You get to play Jacksonville and Houston 4 times. And so, that's 4 wins that you should have in your back pocket there. And so I think that they're really pushing to be an impactful team and a team that really makes some noise this year. I don't know that they're Super Bowl contenders necessarily, but I certainly expect them to make the playoffs. And once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. So I definitely like this Colts team. I think they've done a good job making themselves really competitive and giving themselves this window. Now we're going to talk about the team that finished the number 1 seed in the AFC last year, the Tennessee Titans. So the Titans were kind of a weird team last year because they lost a lot of pieces. Derrick Henry was out for the year. They just didn't have everyone there at all times, and they still kept pounding and finding a way to win games. They won the AFC regular season crown over the Chiefs, over the Bengals, over the Bills. They had some really, good games throughout that season. And then they go into this offseason and they trade away A.J. Brown, who I think is a top 10 receiver in the league. I get it that they didn't want to pay him, but man, that hurts. You go ahead, you trade him away. You get Treylon Burks, who I really like Treylon Burks, but to expect him to replace the production of A.J. Brown is not going to happen. You trade for Robert Woods as well, who's coming off a major injury. He's a little bit older. We'll kind of see what he is at this point. I don't really know. You lose Julio Jones as well, which admittedly he wasn't that great last year, but still, they just don't have a lot of depth and weapons for Ryan Tannehill to throw to. So I think that this is really important because Derrick Henry was injured a lot of last season. He came back in the playoff game against the Bengals, looked not like himself at all. He looked really uncomfortable. And that's concerning because there's a threshold that when running backs hit it over the course of their career with touches, it is really, really difficult for them to maintain the elite production that they have had beforehand. We've seen it with elite guys before, and although Derrick Henry has been awesome the last couple of years, he has now hit that threshold, and I'm really worried about his availability and his ability to just continue to put up monster seasons. I think the Titans have really built themselves to rely on Derrick Henry, and if he's breaking down, that becomes really problematic for me because I don't think Ryan Tannehill is good enough to elevate the players around him. If he is going to have to go in there and go win a game because of his excellence, I don't think he's going to be able to do it. And, we kind of saw him collapse a little bit in the playoff game against the Bengals. He did not look good at all. So I'm a little bit worried about him having to take a larger role in this offense without A.J. Brown and without Julio Jones. Now, this team does have some really nice pieces. Taylor Lewan, great tackle. They've got some decent offensive linemen. They re-signed Ben Jones. They did let Roger Saffold walk, however. On defense, you've got Jeffrey Simmons and Kevin Byard, who are both top 5 at their respective positions. You've also got some nice players like Harold Landry, Christian Fulton. So you've got some good players throughout that defense in particular. That's definitely going to keep them competitive this season. They're not going to fall off a cliff. Vrabel is too good of a coach to let that happen. But I do think that they may have outlived their Super Bowl window at this point. And I don't know that they're going to be able to keep up with the rest of the AFC if Derrick Henry really kind of starts to slow down and they have to rely more on the passing game. I don't think that's going to be a recipe for success for them. So I think until Malik Willis, who they drafted and I think was a great pick, or another quarterback comes in that's really able to elevate the play of the people around them, I don't know that this Titans team is going to be in a Super Bowl window. Now, that's not to discredit the players that they have right now. They added Roger McCreary, who was a really nice pick as well in this draft. They've got good players in the secondary. In particular, you've got some nice pass rushers. You've got Bud Dupree. You've got Harold Landry. There's good players all over this team. It's just a matter of, are they going to be able to keep up with the firepower in the AFC now? The AFC West is loaded. You've got the Bills. You've got the Bengals. There's a lot of really good teams. Even the Colts in your own division, I think, are probably built to be a little more competitive this year. And you're going to have a little bit of a tough time keeping up with a lot of them. So I think the win total for this year is probably going to be somewhere between 7 and 10 wins. It's probably going to be right around 500. Either way, I don't see them winning 7, but I think probably somewhere in that range is where they end up. They're going to be fighting for a playoff spot. I don't know if they'll get it. I don't know if they won't, but I do think that they'll be in that mix, but this AFC is just really, really tough at this point. And I do think we might see a little bit of a drop-off for the Titans here, which is not an uncommon take this offseason, but it is something that I do believe. So that's going to do it for the AFC South here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please comment down below which division you want me to do next. I really appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up. I would appreciate it so much. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, guys.